I was getting a sense of a God who was not always damning me. I would always try to articulate for people. It was like I had this really deep kind of in spiritual terms conversion or just kind of falling in love with God and life and theology. What
the hell? What the hell? What the hell is up? Hi, and welcome to this new experimental podcast of mine. My name is Claire, and I'm here to ask the tough questions in life, such as, what the hell is up? With you? With me? With the world? With those crazy vegan YouTubers out there on the web? This podcast is a play for me to be more honest and to put something out there that might be an encouragement to others. I'm keen on honesty and authenticity, yet I have somewhat learned to hide. So I hope that each podcast episode will allow me to get more comfortable in sharing out about my journey. Topics which will be addressed include my journey of mental health struggles, self-esteem and self-worth, sexuality, and a whole slew of other potentially relevant tidbits of my story. Thanks so very much for tuning in to listen. Grab some coffee or tea and think of this as the coffee shop date of your dreams. Hello, and welcome back to What the Hell is Up? Today is February 15th. It's the day after Valentine's Day. I hope that you had the loveliest of Valentine's Days filled with sweets and maybe bouquets of roses or date nights. But hopefully, most importantly, you told the people you care about that you love them and were reminded that you are so very loved in yourself. Yeah. Today I'm wondering, what the hell is up with faith? And what the hell is up with my faith? And where am I at with my faith journey? What the hell is up with doubt and exploring other religions? Today's episode is all about faith and sort of exploring new beliefs and wondering about new ideas in faith. Today's episode is about feminist theology and just grappling with doubt and pushback when it comes to claiming what we actually believe. I had the opportunity to sit down with a professor of mine from Seattle Pacific University and reconnect with her over tea and cookies. Dr. Shannon Smythe is such a lovely soul, and I was so blessed to capture our conversation about her background and her journey coming into ordination and her a little bit about her faith journey. Also in this episode, I'm featuring music by Leah Lawson. This song is called Israel, and Leah Lawson is a Seattle-based singer-songwriter who has the most gorgeous voice and has put out some lovely songs. I definitely recommend you check out her Instagram and go take a listen. You won't regret it. She's also playing shows around the city, so if you check out her Instagram, I'm sure you can see when she's gonna be playing next. So I'm so blessed to be able to include Israel in this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so blessed to have your listening ear, so let's just dive in. Thank you so much for inviting me in. We're drinking some tea. Shannon has this lemon loaf tea, and I'm drinking her.
It smells amazing.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually smell it. That smells, oh wow.
I know.
You can smell the vanilla glaze.
Yeah, I know. I'm drinking my cake.
Oh my gosh,
and
that's
eating
lovely.
it too. No, eating a cookie.
There are cookies as well.
Help yourself.
Oh, thank you. So, okay, you're ordained in that. Thanks. Oh, are these are the Biscoff ones?
Yes, the Biscoff
are so good.
Yes.
They serve these on airplanes.
I know, and they're so
I love
good.
it.
And I got it in bulk at Costco.
Ooh, that's awesome.
I know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you're ordained in the PC USA.
Yes.
And that's the Presbyterian Church of the USA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how long ago did you do that? Or when were you ordained?
Not long ago. So for me, my ordination happened in, I think it was June of 2017. So fairly recent.
That is
fairly kind recent. Of a fairly recent kind of development of my own kind of call and journey with church and ministry and theology. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, talking with you actually, I think I remember you got herbal tea when we met at Tully's. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
Because I wanted to hear about your experience, like, specifically as a woman in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that was, like, really an important part of your journey, like, coming into the church and kind of with your background and your family.
With my family. Yeah, that's exactly right. I do remember that. Yep.
So that must still feel like an amazing accomplishment with coming from that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of journey for me. I'm really grateful for where I'm at now. But it took a long time to get to a place where I could affirm and embrace my own call to ministry outside of just academia. And that was, I had a lot of kind of holdups just from kind of internalizing the displeasure of my parents.
Yeah. That's so hard.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant thing.
And is that still the case with, is their perception of that still pretty much the same as it was before?
Yeah. I think at this point, so there's been kind of various ways that this has impacted our relationship, and it took a certain shape when I was a college student who wanted to study theology, and there was this eruption of you can't teach men Bible or theology because you're a woman and because of what Scripture says, and I was still in some sense they saw me as their child under their household kind of authority, and so there was a power dynamic there. When I started pursuing the last little bits of requirements for ordination, just by going to seminary and getting a Master of Divinity degree, I had kind of the bulk of the requirements done, even though I wasn't pursuing ordination. But when I was at the time of my life where I had finished my PhD and I was married and we had a young child, and I was trying to figure out my calling and work and be more realistic about my options for doing ministry and using my passions and gifts and education.
Yeah.
And said I might need to consider Plan B. So Plan B I had never considered because I always had in my head my parents' displeasure, and I had already had these challenging conversations with them that were really painful.
Yeah.
So then the question became, them learning of that in the context of me kind of in my own home, a grown up, married with a kid, and their way of voicing displeasure came to say, well, you need us to help watch your child so you can do some of these requirements, like a hospital chaplaincy, and they said no to that. And so at that point, I just said, you know what, I didn't say to them, but it was very painful to me. Yeah. And so I just didn't tell them when I was ordained. I mean, it's just, we just don't talk about it. So yeah, it's kind of particular to my own journey. And the struggle of looking for somebody who's a people pleaser, wants to be the good child.
Yeah.
Not getting that, and then internalizing, some messages about who I was and what I could do within the church, and then kind of breaking free of that, but still having those kind of wounds with me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I could see how that kind of doubt or, shame about what you're doing could really just be almost kind of innate at that point, or just like assumed, with having that be just kind of a default in your life with that kind of thinking surrounding what you're doing.
Yeah. Kind of created this kind of setting where there was a lot of, I would feel one way in one scenario, like in a a church and denomination that was supportive of women, and I would feel like it's all good and look at all these ordained women and I can be like them and there's no big deal.
Yeah.
But then I would go back to the home setting, or my geographical distance between where I lived and where my parents lived got much smaller. And so then I started to feel the kind of the dissonance, and then the shame kind of played a greater role again.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate in some ways with even my podcast, just certain people in my life that I didn't tell about, because I was like, I don't know how you're gonna feel about this. So it's kind of a strange thing, like when something is so important to you, especially for you, when it's your livelihood, it's your really who you are, and not being able to connect with that and someone who's so important to you still.
Yeah. And you're searching for like freedom, you're searching to be who you really are. And in certain settings you feel that just fine, and then you go back in other settings and it rubs again, you know, and you feel some sort of doubt. Or for me, the shape it takes for me, given my personality, like I'm an Enneagram 1, and Enneagram 1 personality
I've been hearing about this, and I need to do it.
About the Enneagram thing?
Yeah.
I know. I learned about this during the chaplaincy program, and it was very, very insightful.
So you're a category 1. What does that mean?
It means, it means a lot of things. I'm not going to do it justice, but one of the things is, you're very concerned about being good. You kind of see the world often in categories of moral categories, and you don't want to be associated with what is bad or what is evil. I'm gonna sneeze.
Bless you.
Sorry about that. And so just thinking about how I want to say, so it's very internalized. You have this really strong inner critic who's always trying to figure out, am I good? Am I good? Am I good? But then that gets externalized towards the world, often very in unhealthy ways. It can get externalized to the world as judging everyone else to these impossible standards.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's healthy versions and unhealthy versions of anybody of any kind of personality type. So that could be an unhealthy version. But really it's stemming from this really strong inner critic that's going kind of 24/7 for the person. As they are trying to like carefully make their way in the world and make sure they're always good. So I just find that operating very strongly in my life. And so as it relates to this challenge with not being accepted by my parents for my being a woman called to ministry, you know, what then the script for me is that I'm somehow bad. I'm doing something bad and rebellious.
That's a fascinating form of rebellion, though.
Yeah, right? I know. It's crazy. And you're just highlighting that, so thank you.
It is, because, I mean, wow, there's just so many layers to how even, like, I mean, from your parents' perspective, you being a woman in ministry is rebellious, but almost there's something rebellious about even claiming, like, some aspects of religion, I feel like, nowadays, in another fashion, that'd be totally separate from what their idea about the rebellion is in it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, I mean, I know a little bit about how your intersectional kind of theology and is also kind of maybe a little more edgy in certain Christian circles.
Certain circles, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely in my parents, they
really
flip in their grave if they had any inkling.
Oh my God. So how did
they're not dead. Sorry, that was a really bad metaphor.
I understood what you were saying. But did you ever, I don't know, did like their thinking about the church ever, and kind of like how women are, their view on women in the church, how did that affect your like ideas of kind of like the validity of religion, or not validity of, I guess, how did it affect your perception of Christianity? Like being a woman and trying to like kind of bring those together.
Yeah.
And how did that affect your own grappling with what you believed, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's certainly, I think, I was kind of pushing away from what I had been raised with, and I came into SPU and was a theology major, and so was getting exposed even on a, an SPU level back in 1998 to 2002, to ideas of thinking, ways to think about God and the world and ourselves that were not, we'll say, not sanctioned by the kind of theology I'd been raised with. And for me, it was initially just incredibly attractive because I was getting a sense of a God who was not always damning me.
That's a freeing
so
concept.
It was totally freeing. And my, it was kind of, I would always like try to articulate for people. It was like I had this like really deep kind of like, in spiritual terms, like conversion, or like, just kind of like falling in love with God and life and theology. Like I was just like, I love this. I can't get enough of this.
That's awesome.
So it's very, very profound. But that line, also created a deep distrust with the faith that I had been raised with.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
And which denomination was that?
That was just like non-denom, conservative, white, evangelical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see?
So that was what I was pushing against at the same time as I was finding freedom in thinking about faith in more expansive ways, let's say.
Yeah.
And that just continued when I went to seminary at a mainline denomination on the East Coast, and my perspectives were broadened even more. And, I was always kind of trying to walk some careful line while questioning, can I stay true to what I feel like is most important about how I understand God and the world? At the same time, can I listen really well to the theologies and perspectives that challenge me? And that kind of notion, I think, has just deepened over time. It kind of got reignited when I came on faculty at SPU, kind of in the midst of kind of the social setting that we're in the current moment, in the midst of, there was a lot of racialized tensions and upheavals and calls from students to have queer affirming theology, theology from theologians of color, and all of that caused me to kind of go back even again to listen to other voices than what I was raised with, and to hear the truth and to have my own understandings kind of challenged and transformed and refined. And so it's been a really interesting, fun journey the past couple of years.
That's great. Well, it's amazing that you discovered all of that, because I feel like some people don't end up seeing that the non-denom, white, evangelical, conservative Christianity isn't representative of the faith. Like, I mean, I feel like that side of it is still what a lot of people think of or are challenged by. Right.
Yeah. And, you ask a certain person and somebody would say, oh, SPU is some liberal bastion. You ask another person and they might see it as too white and conservative. But from my context, when I came to my undergrad program, my community at the time and home, I was like trying to make sure that they didn't find out how, what a liberal bastion it was. you know.
That's really fascinating.
And then by choosing to go to a mainline seminary on the East Coast.
And mainline, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what that is.
So mainline denominations more recently have been, you know, as the evangelical positions itself against culture, the mainline churches position themselves as trying to assimilate and match culture, kind of progressive culture.
So would this be like Episcopalian and Methodist?
Yeah, and United Methodist and PCUSA. So there's a couple different versions of Presbyterian denominations. So PCUSA ordains women. The past couple of years has redefined their definition of marriage. So they have sometimes they have a more high church approach to worship and liturgy. They have a lot of formalized statements sometimes on theology. This is not totally the same in every denomination. Episcopals are more, they might say smells and bells. Presbyterians are real nerdy. They write lots of confessions and books of order. You know, so there's all these differences, but they get the ELCA, so the it's the mainline Lutheran denomination. Yeah,
the Evangelical Lutheran.
There we go. Evangelical.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, okay. Church of America. Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of the mainline. So to an evangelical, if you say mainline seminary, they're going to think, you know, liberal bastion or something like that, or heretics. You know.
It's fascinating though, because as I'm looking back on my experience at SPU, I don't know, it's just interesting the ways that I'm kind of realizing aspects of my experience in college that I didn't really notice when I was in it. And it almost feels like the theology was similarly, like, I thought it was amazing to, like, I felt like I was really pushed to broaden my understanding, and it was great. But then almost like the cultural tone on campus maybe was different than that. And so have you noticed that? Like, or
I think I know what you're talking about. I mean, I'd have to hear a little bit more from you. I mean, one thing I would say is, like, the kind of degree to which people are stretched by the theology courses here is very relative. So I could see, it sounds like your background is more evangelical or non-denom. Is that correct?
Yeah, somewhat. My background was a little... My family and I grew up in a Lutheran church.
Okay.
But in high school, I kind of discovered evangelical, non-denom, and was kind of like jazzed by what felt like, I guess, deeper emotions. And but then coming to college, I kind of had a reckoning with, like, oh, actually, my heart really appreciated what I kind of grew up in, and then realizing things about that faith that I started to discover in high school, and so it was kind of a mix, I guess, but it just was definitely nuanced by in college, and I guess connecting with students coming from different church backgrounds, like whether it was non-denominational and or if, but then I feel like the theology was usually more progressive.
Okay.
I don't know if that...
Okay.
So for me, it was... I feel like I was kind of already open. And it wasn't like a total shift.
Yeah. Because
I had that Lutheran upbringing, and I've always kind of been just really curious about things. But it was still like discovering a lot of things I never knew.
Right. Yeah. But then how are you kind of distinguishing that in the kind of theological realm with what you said, like the social tone on campus?
Yeah, well, I guess it's really hard to articulate, but maybe in my boyfriend, who we just started dating in September.
Okay.
And he went to a public school.
Okay.
So it's kind of like swapping stories about what the culture was like at a public school versus in SPU. And
Okay.
I remember a few friends who would kind of feel a little pressured by an SPU image of like kind of a model SPU student, or like this Christian who's really active in their church and like really service-minded, and feeling some pressures to be that person.
Yeah.
And also thinking about just how the university was being pushed to be adapting its statement about like LGBTQ inclusion in the church and these things,
right?
And how that kind of does affect the social undertones that are present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to.
Well, I think that part of why I'm asking is I'm thinking, you know, my relationship to SPU is, now I'm faculty, but back in the day I was a student. But the tone on campus when I was a student is not necessarily, although there's some through lines, it's still a very different time now. Mm-hmm. So partly I don't think I know fully what you're trying to describe because my interactions with students still are by and large in classroom settings, and then, you know, the random times where they come to my office hours, which doesn't give me a feel for the student experience, you know, whether it's in campus living situations or, you know, in the student union building, or just the feel that gets communicated, you know, culturally, the culture of the student life here. Yeah. So it's hard to know exactly how to speak into it.
I could see
at this stage of life. But I'm trying to imagine it just from, well, like I had you in this required Christian theology class that every student has to take before they graduate, along with two other, you know, unless they transfer into other, you know, Bible, Christian faith classes. And so I feel like that's my closest sense of student tone, because I'm getting students who would not take this class if they didn't have to. And so then I get a perspective of the variety of students here outside of the little, you know, school of theology, theology nerds or whatever. Say that lovingly.
I don't know how I would quite articulate the culture, but maybe it's obvious that it would just be different than a public
school.
Sure. And just so some of those...
for sure. I mean, institutionally, you're bringing in kind of the historic white evangelical shtick with all that comes with that, whether or not individual students align themselves with that. That's a culture, that's power, there's power in the institution of the university, and that's going to be experienced very differently on a Christian campus than a public one. Not that, you know, patriarchy and heteronormativity and racism and all of the rest don't exist in public university spaces, but they're going to exist somewhat differently, and students will feel it differently.
Of course.
And it creates different culture. And
I think I think it really just does kind of depend on what kind of context a student is coming from to figure out if how much those different things are, like how much has patriarchy played a role in their Christianity before coming to SPU, and then kind of whether it is more progressive or less is so different depending on the background, like you said, which is really interesting.
I feel like a stranger in the house of God. My old beat-up Bible don't make sense anymore, but call my name.
It is Wednesday night, and it is 11:20 p.m. And I've been scrolling on Tumblr looking at funny videos and memes and related paraphernalia. The best thing I've come across in a while. And this actually was from 2015. But it's just go on YouTube and type Halloween party for Galapagos tortoise seniors. It's just pure magic. That's all I'm gonna say. So that happened upon me. So I feel blessed and loved by God and the universe for that one. But tonight I went to something I've been thinking about going to for a while. I went to a meditation session at a Buddhist temple. It was a Vietnamese Zen Buddhism with a Dharma talk afterwards. And I found this on meetup.com, which was fancy to discover because basically I read this book by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist writer and speaker who has a lot of writings that have become more popular in the Western world, which is why I probably got my hands on one because I recognized his name and have been wanting to read his stuff. So I read a book by him called You Are Here, and it was a great introduction to Buddhist meditation and just mindfulness and being present in the moment. Really lovely and informative. It was really easy to read, and I kind of just brought it into my morning meditation that I sometimes do after a bit of yoga, and it was really refreshing. I was amazed at how much the book helped me to start a meditative practice and how refreshed I felt going into my day after doing meditation. Even for 15 minutes, I felt, I don't know, more centered, more energetic. I don't know, I just felt joyful to start the day because it really did center me and helped make me grateful for really the fundamental things about living, just my breath, and thankful to my body and just having a moment. And so this meditation is kind of a new thing for me, but I stumbled across this book and now I'm really intrigued to learn more about Buddhism in general. And there's so much to know. I think it's interesting because I come from a background of Christianity and growing up going to church usually and going to a Christian university. I feel like I'm pretty in tune with the framework of Christian narrative and understand a lot of the language and the stories. And even if certain denominations are unfamiliar to me, at least when I go to a church, I'm not usually very surprised, which is, it has some comfort in that. But I love trying out new things and discovering new people and the origins of different traditions and trying to understand them. Plus, I've definitely been feeling a little bit like Pi from Life of Pi. If you've read that book, it's just all about this boy and his quest to discover truth, and it's kind of all about this question of what is truth anyways, and how do we know what is true or not? Can we have this multifaceted idea of religion, which kind of edges into this controversy of religious pluralism? And I don't know, I'm definitely in this exploratory time when I used to be just someone who considered myself a Christian, and then later on in early college, beyond just having doubts, which are normal parts of faith, I took this class called World Religions, and I really started to consider the fact that Christianity is the only religion that I've ever truly been exposed to. So, of course, I've been taught that this is truth. But B, I discovered all the beauty in different religions and just a little bit about each of them. And also that, I guess, from what I gathered, all religions point to similar truth in one way or another. All are really pouring out of a universal human desire to have peace and hope and intimacy with one another and with, you could say, the universe or transcendence or beauty or God or something within us that centers us, whatever that is. It seems that all religions are aiming for that, but they do it in different ways. And I don't know, I kind of love that. So I'm definitely grappling with this changing perspective I have on faith, and I don't know, I love these religious traditions that embrace nuanced ideas of faith and religion, like Hinduism and Buddhism, that are open to bringing in other religious mindsets. I mean, I loved reading this book by Thich Nhat Hanh because he would talk about the Christian God and the Holy Spirit, which is a Christian concept, but talk about it in the context of a Buddhist meditation. I mean, it was very accessible to anyone, and I loved how humble it was and how universal it could be for anybody. It didn't exclude anyone. And obviously, it's pretty widely known that Christianity is awash with controversies and conflicts and, I mean, corruption is honestly the word I would use, and all religions have their issues and all have contributed to conflicts, but the magnitude of violence that Christianity has had in the world cannot be ignored. When you think about wars and sexual abuse and exclusion of LGBTQ folks and the pain caused there, and let's see what else, the inferiority of women, just the list goes on and on. And yet I can't give up my faith, and I'm not ready to say I'm not a Christian. I definitely think my religion is in flux. My faith is in flux, but I'm not really afraid of that, because I still feel compelled to pray and to foster hope in things that are more real to me than what we can sometimes place our hope in. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I still feel compelled to pray, and I still love the concept of grace in the Bible, and I mean, I still believe in God, and I still find value in scripture, and I think certain aspects of church liturgy are beautiful. But dang, this meditation I went to at this Buddhist temple was so amazing, and I have never experienced something quite like this. I mean, I've gone to yoga and I've done meditation in other settings, learned about mindfulness and stuff, but never in like this much of a spiritual way, and never in this kind of community. In the Sangha is what it's called, I think, and I'm really just learning about some of these concepts, but being in a group of people and meditating together really did help me focus more and helped me feel more energized in my meditation. And like, surely my mind still drifted, and I'm still like super new at meditating for that long. I think we were meditating for like 40 minutes maybe. But just like being around all of these people was super centering, and I kind of just kept reflecting on these mantras that I learned from the book I read, and yeah, I don't know, it was cool. And I love the way, like, the idea of meditation and finding seeds of compassion in the present moment within ourselves kind of acknowledges the potential in the human spirit to like foster our own peace and to like foster our own love and goodness within ourselves. I just love that concept. And yeah, I really don't know a lot about these concepts, but I loved the feeling of that. And I also loved the humility of the leader. I mean, this monk who led the meditation and then this like mantra chanting and then this like open dialogue after. I mean, come on, so different than a Christian pastor who is going on and on about his opinion about this scripture and kind of using this sort of attractive way of talking to get you to understand something about the Bible. I mean, this guy was just speaking frankly, simply, not saying very much, no pretense of anything. Such humility and compassion in his eyes, which I've encountered sometimes in Christianity, but certainly not all the time. And yeah, but then after, so we did a meditation and then we walked around the room doing this mindful walk. And then after that, he, the monk, he led us in this chanting. And I can't remember the name of the chant. I'm sure this is part of like a typical, I want to say the word liturgy, a typical like body of words, I guess, that Buddhist practicing folks use. It was really lovely. Something about enlightenment. I don't even remember what it was, but it was super empowering and centering. And just cool to do that in a group. Also not scary. You know, sometimes these, I just remember times of being in a Christian setting where there was like this pressure to be really emotionally expressive in like charismatic type of Christianity or even just like evangelical churches. And I loved the way that this mantra was so focused on the simplicity of the words, and there was no concern for that emotional expression. Like there was no anxiety there. It was very relaxing and felt very spiritual and simple and also just very human, I guess, like saying it together. But after that, this monk, he opened up the room, and I think there was like 20 people here, everybody sitting on their meditation mat. And they all knew I was like, it was my first time there. Like most of them seemed to have been coming for a while. And the monk, he said, like, does anybody have any questions about their practice or any concerns about their meditative practice or just anything going on in your life that you would like to share about? And like, of course, everyone was silent for a while. But then people started to share, and this, just like different things going on in their lives, questions about different things. And I don't know, I felt compelled to say something. And so I went out on a limb and kind of asked a question about this problem I've been having with my family. And I don't know, on the one hand, I was like, should I share this out? Like, is this annoying? I'm new. Should I say anything? But then I was like, honestly, this feels like an opportunity. I mean, other people are sharing, and I don't know, I just went for it. And I was like, I have a freaking monk at my disposal. Why wouldn't I seek his knowledge? And just like the knowledge of all these people here. So I shared about it, and they asked some clarifying questions, and then people around the room started providing me with like little tidbits of their experience, or just sharing about, I mean, they would kind of empathize with me and then share. They were like, some people were like, wow, yeah, I really know what you've experienced. Or some were like, I've never experienced that before. And to me, the most interesting aspect of sharing this in this kind of setting was like, whoa, everyone has something different to say about this. Truly, like, I don't know, I feel like as much as you can know about a situation, especially when it comes to like conflict in relationships, everybody has like a different experience and a different idea of what's right and a different truth to bring to the table and a different way of going about things and even looking at situations. It was fascinating to me, but at the end of it, this monk leading the meditation kind of brought it back to what each thing was brought back to, and that was to like not really worry about other people, but focus on myself and focus on bringing compassion and kindness. And if I can sow seeds of compassion and bring that energy, that's going to spread. And no matter what someone is making me feel, no matter what kind of hurt or conflict is going on, if I can continue to show compassion and live that kind of energy, then those like good energetic vibes are going into the universe one way or another. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still not sure what to make of this situation I'm in. But at the end of the day, I know that this line of thinking has some truth in it. And I don't know how it'll connect to my Christian faith, but I just believe that finding that center and peace, that mindfulness in ourselves, and using that to foster compassion in the world and seeing that rub off on others is so exciting. And I just feel like it could go so far. So, and we'll see how it goes, but it feels like an awesome opportunity to learn something new and nuance my faith. And I don't know, I used to be kind of subconsciously afraid of how this would affect my doubt or my Christian faith, but I don't know, I truly believe that this kind of like peace and community that you could feel is a blessing from God, and there's really no way around that. So yeah, that was my experience at the Vietnamese Zen Buddhist temple. Thanks for listening.
I looked in the mirror and I wanted to change all the work that your hands made, and Lord, I let it tear me apart.
But kind of shifting, I'm curious about maybe the struggle of like pushing back on your parents a bit, or doing something that they were not supportive of, and being inspired by different aspects of theology that affirmed your truth, that you were like, no, I'm a woman, I'm a child of God, I can do this. Like, yeah. Have you ever did you ever have like such doubt that you thought about, should I look into other faiths, or right, is there truth in something else? Like, is the bad outweighing the good? Or
yeah. You know, I think for me that didn't actually happen. It was never, and that, you know, whether that's because you could say, well, I was just so entrenched, or whether you could say because of my own kind of fear, and again, that inner critic of being right. Christianity is, you know, kind of holds a lot of power as a dominant religion in the world. Yeah. You know, now I'm trying to kind of mine my own reasons for that. Or maybe it's because where I landed was, in fact, at SPU, which expanded me enough while maintaining a safety net. And it showed for me, for who I was, for the kind of student I was, it was the kind of right testing ground that I didn't feel like I needed to push any further.
Okay.
I started to find the answers.
Yeah. And you found sort of like comfort in those answers.
And I think I found the comfort because I was, you know, when you're, I don't know, for me, something about that parental voice in the head is a pretty powerful one. At least for me it was. And the timing of, you know, when I'm trying to A, kind of make my own way in the world, but B, I'm still reliant on my parents.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking for some kind of safety. For my own journey, it was like I just needed to kind of, you know, I had faculty, SPU profs who became kind of like stand-in mentors and parents for me as I was kind of navigating. So that created this kind of like safety within which to kind of test some bounds. But the bounds that I was testing were like just really between like a conservative evangelical bound and just a more expansive Christian faith.
Yeah. But that was big for you.
That was big for me at the time. Yeah, it was big for me at the time. But it was shaping enough, I think, to my identity and how I understood my faith that, you know, when I went forward, it was, no, I identify this way. I identify as a Christian. I don't know that I'm an evangelical anymore, or maybe I want to redefine what I mean by that, or okay, maybe now I'm okay with becoming, you know, a mainliner, you know. But for me, it didn't push me towards looking at other faiths for whatever reason.
So if someone had, if I asked you, like, why are you a Christian?
Yeah.
What would you say exactly?
What would I say? I would say I would probably want to use language of, I'm trying to learn what it means to follow Jesus with a group of people who want to do the same. And for me, that looks like pushing into spaces that are, or maybe pushing is the wrong word, but acclimating myself in spaces and with people who are forgotten or whose voices have been marginalized.
Yeah.
And to me, I see that that's not only where Jesus goes, but that's actually a strong aspect of Jesus's identity.
Yeah.
So I see myself as this kind of, you know, Gentile who's been brought in to a faith that wasn't mine, and I'm trying to learn what it means to follow Jesus, who is not white.
Yeah.
Right? Who is not
existing on the margins in his society.
It's not the dominant.
Yeah.
And that's a journey for me, but that becomes a very exciting journey.
I can tell by the way you're
it just feels like whether or not somebody else calls themselves a follower of Jesus, I feel like that opens a great compatibility with people of many different faiths who are working to see wholeness and shalom actually lived out in our world today.
Yeah. So you said, let me make sure I'm understanding what you just said, that those people in other faith traditions still have some compatibility with someone identifying as Christian because of that desire to see shalom in the world. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like I don't know that they would. I would say more that we're maybe the same spirit is moving.
Yeah.
The same living God.
That.
You know?
Yeah.
I know that I think I know a whole lot, but if we're going to talk about who God is in our world, I think God confounds the wisdom of the wise, right? So, yeah, I think a lot more humility is needed, especially by those who call themselves Christians, because of the role and the place of Christianity in the world, doing violence and destruction on so many people's lives.
Yeah.
So, I probably have way more to learn from people of other faiths than they have to learn from me. I think that's probably the truth.
that sounds kind of exciting to...
It is
put it that way.
exciting. Yeah.
I'm kind of at this crossroads in my own faith.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why exactly, but I think after college, like, I experienced some things and just kind of starting to, like, distill what I believe in and what I want to keep pursuing.
Yeah.
And I've developed, like, a natural curiosity about maybe other faiths, and I used to have such a feeling of just like an implicit compelling feeling of, okay, I need to read my Bible, like I need to do this, and I still have some of those, but I've kind of like gave myself a new freedom of maybe I should lean into what I'm curious about and what I don't want to do right now, and see where that leads. Like, for some reason I haven't felt as compelled to read my Bible daily, but I still feel like praying all the time, and I still want to go to church, but I also kind of want to look into Buddhist meditation, and kind of just I've kind of realized the sense of shame about not reading my Bible, or the shame of, like, maybe I don't believe this has felt like a godly love. The freedom to, like, realize that it's okay. And I've almost seen that in the way that, like, in somebody who's a non-Christian, or, like, I say this in air quotes because somebody who hasn't attached themselves to the label of Christianity and still seeing the love of God in their life.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know, it's been a strange, like, good place, but also a little disorienting.
Well, and it sounds like you're trying to let go of those shaming kind of voices and ideas that give you kind of a one-way, kind of zero-sum approach to life and faith. Whether they make you feel like you're too much or like you're not enough, and yet you're trying to pay attention to what you actually hear and feel deeply in yourself, and to say, I don't think I have to mistrust this.
Yeah.
I think I can actually
It's a hilarious thing to have to realize.
Well, but it's so understandable. It's so understandable if we look at what it means to be socialized into our world, in the bodies that we're in the way that Christianity has often operated. I think something for me, I was thinking of, I don't know if this is going to sound like somebody saying, I'm not a racist because I have a black friend, because I'm not meaning it for it to sound like that, but I was really struck when I was in this chaplain or CPE, clinical pastoral education program in a hospital, and our cohort was people of different faiths. There was like a Unitarian, there was a more evangelical, two evangelicals. I was kind of maybe the mainline rep. And then we had a gal who is Jewish, and then we had two Unitarians. So anyway, the beauty of the Jewish faith that she enfleshed and embodied and then shared with us was just profound to me.
It's amazing.
And so it sounds, I'm not trying to say that I have all this knowledge of the Jewish faith, because I don't at all.
I see what you're saying by the original disclaimer.
That was feeling the need for the disclaimer.
But you saw some beauty in what she...
Oh, just beauty and truth, and areas where gaps and things lacking in my own articulation of the Christian faith, right?
Yeah.
That could learn so much.
Yeah. That's
so
really cool.
much. And you know, the Unitarian members would bring in reflections that were Buddhist reflections or that were transcendentalists, and you know, and it was a great opportunity as an adult. You know, this was just like 5 years ago or something for me, to be exposed to this in this very kind of small cohort where we're kind of interrogating each other's lives and way of giving care in a hospital situation, thinking about people's well-being, you know. So anyway, I just offer that hopefully as like just to say yes to what you're wanting to explore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
That there's so much out there that is good and right and true.
Yeah.
And brings wholeness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the Christian faith doesn't have a corner on that market. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I took a world religions class in my sophomore year.
Yeah.
With Dr. Cuse, Diane Cuse.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at like the beauty that was present in Hinduism and Buddhism, and I went to a Hindu temple for like it was kind of like a little field
right
experience, and just like the generosity present and my default ability to like spiritually connect in some way, but then also still having my way of thinking and framework, I think, still hinging on Christianity.
Yeah.
And kind of like still appreciating that and letting that still guide me, but finding beauty in other things and seeing, maybe I'll find out what that kind of leads to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks. And I still remember watching like Beyonce in your class, and do you still show,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, in that class 3100. Yeah, and it's always a mixed bag of reactions.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's all right. It's all right. It's always interesting for me to kind of try to navigate in my white body, trying to represent the theology of womanist theologians, Black women who self-identify, name themselves as womanist theologians, and wanting to share that with students, but also just seeing historical patterns of how Black women's knowledge is, derided
or sort of appropriated by other, or
well, could be, but I'm just thinking of the ways that folks are hesitant to enter in and really listen to their knowledge as true knowledge.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
So sort of like an assumption that what womanist theology is bringing is less than true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Wow. Well, that's I loved hearing about those different theologies. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I imagine
some students do, absolutely. And some students are grateful to, I remember one student said, wow, I didn't know anybody talked about God like this besides me and my mom and my grandma.
Oh, wow.
And then other students, often white students, get very intimidated, threatened, fragile.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, I think what you were saying about your Christianity, like kind of being the social justice aspect, kind of being embedded. It's like if it doesn't include a conversation that like pushes one to recognize their privilege and kind of look into that, and why does it provoke that reaction, like it should kind of include that conversation.
Yeah, it should. It's a challenge as a professor trying to navigate a variety of reactions to getting a more holistic picture of theologies within Christianity and navigate that among different students with different approaches and needs and backgrounds. So it's not that it's not important, but
sounds challenging as heck.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's, I mean, in some ways, like, that's a lot of our world today, at least from where I'm sitting. I realize I have a certain perspective and there's lots of blind spots, but I just see so much challenge in how can white people listen and learn really well from those not like them, at the same time as recognize our culpability that we're standing on the backs of Black, Indigenous people of color as we're trying to listen and learn, or we're standing on the backs and jumping up and down and not wanting to listen and learn. So I think it's an interesting time to bring faith and theology, maybe bring it down as a white person who's been educated in white European and white evangelical theology. Bring it down off of its pride of place, and realize that I have a lot of listening and learning to do. So that's what I hear, in you, coming from some of your background, and then you're switching to evangelical and your experience at SPU, and you're kind of reckoning with your own kind of wondering and curiosity and not wanting to kind of move in the world thinking everything is wrong and bad, right? Because what kind of picture of God must we have if everything has to get seen in these kind of damning terms rather than fullness and abundance and goodness?
Totally. I'm gonna check the time right now. Probably wrap it up. Can I ask you one more question? And this, I don't know if this is a quick question, but you can leave it as short as you want.
My best.
I guess I would love to hear just like a brief bit about what feminist theology means to you, or how this has become important to your faith. And
Well, that's a long question, or maybe a long discussion. Feminist theology for me is really important. I have to kind of like do a caveat to say the origins of feminist theology was white women doing theology, looking only from their perspective, and often continuing to perpetuate systems of harm and oppression against their sisters of color. So there's some problematic elements within feminist theology and its roots, and that's still present with us today. I would say, though, that feminist theologies are often trying to help us see well trying to make the subject who is doing the oppression, they're trying to pull back the cover or shine the light and reveal what's trying to remain hidden and invisible. Whether that comes, that's kind of, I would say that's an element of feminism in general. But in feminist theology, that comes out in a whole variety of ways, whether it's, well, whose voice are we listening to? Whose reading of scripture are we privileging? What values are being upheld? In that way, feminist theologies have a lot of resonances with other liberation theologies of different persuasions.
So when you say hidden, do you mean sort of those maybe values or elements that a more kind of male patriarchal theology would ignore?
They're going to just say that's the norm. That's the universal. That's the standard.
Oh, like the male experience becomes the universal in that sort of theology, whereas you're shifting the perspective.
So one move is to highlight that and to make that figure come out of hiding, right? Liberation theologies are going to do that. That's kind of a deconstructive move. Feminist theology has that.
Sort of manifest that this oppressor has been present. Okay.
Calling the shots. They're also going to then recenter other voices, other experiences, right? As true voices and subjects in their own right, without having to follow the dictates of what's been called the standard or the norm.
Okay.
So, you know, we could take that in any number of directions within, I'll just speak to my area, within Christian theology, right? Whether that's how we think about the way language functions and images for God and what we understand.
Sort of like the use of pronouns and
the use of pronouns, exactly, the use of metaphor and images, which ones are functioning for us. Feminist theology in that respect has been very concerned about a core element of Christian faith, to follow God, not to follow idols, right? And so feminist theology has shown the idolatry of making God in the image of a white man.
Okay.
In other areas, you know, they may look at, you know, how do we understand Jesus's death on the cross, right? Is it done in a way that's going to, you know, further inculcate norms for women's oppression, that they are needing to sacrifice or see themselves through the lens of, you know, a male's understanding of the sin against God being pride, right? When maybe it's, for women, has something to do more with the fact that they've not been taking up the space that they should be taking up as a beautiful creature in God's image. Right? That kind of almost an inverse of pride, self-loathing or something.
And as you're saying this, I don't know, I'm thinking about the ways that the idea of shame has, like, shame being what attached to God, and how that could be freed up by, like, a more feminine perspective of God as, like, kind of, I guess, more of those maternal aspects than shaming. Yeah.
So
that's cool.
maybe I'll say that's ...
Yeah.
because so much more could be said.
Well, that was a lovely intro to that.
But just a little insight into why it's incredibly important for how we understand Christian faith and what it tells us about who God is and how we are to live in the world. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. I really appreciated it.
Absolutely. It's right up my list of things I love to talk about. So super
That's
easy.
awesome. And over tea and cookies, even better.
And I feel like I just had cake before dinner, so
That's
that tea was amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Sign off for now. Thank you for being here, Shannon.
Absolutely.